Okay, as in go? Sorry, 1 second.
Forktales, a podcast that feeds the food and beverage world.
Oh, awesome. Forktales is brought to you by Vigor, a branding and marketing agency for passion-driven, innovative restaurant, beverage, and hospitality brands. Learn more at vigorbranding.com. If you love what we're serving up, please give Forktales a 5-star review on your podcast service of choice. Think of it as a tip for good service. Hey everyone, today I am joined by Danny Klein. He serves as Director of Digital Content of Food News Media. You may not know Food News Media, but you do know QSR Magazine and FSR Magazine, which are a constant read for me, and I'm sure, like me, you guys enjoy that content as well. This is the gentleman behind the content, or at least a lot of the content. So, Danny, say hi to everyone and tell us who you are and what you do in better detail than I have.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I think you summed it up pretty well there, but basically we cover the quick service side of the restaurant industry with QSR and the full service side with FSR. And personally, I just cover the trends, daily news, talking to operators, things like that, just for our digital properties. So anything you see on our websites, our daily emails, which hopefully you're subscribed to. That's all part of kind of what I do on a daily basis.
I love it. I mean, so being director of digital, you definitely have your finger on the pulse of what's happening, especially, after a pandemic year, a lot of turbulence, a lot of ups, more downs than ups, I think. But what have been some of the most surprising trends in the past year, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. We were actually talking about this recently, just kind of, where were we in March of last year, as a news organization and kind of how we saw that first couple of weeks. And I think we were pretty aware it was going to become a really wild run. I think, though, like most people, we did not expect it to last as long as it did. I mean, if you kind of remember back at the beginning, we were saying things like, oh, it'll be over by Easter or, mid-April or the summer. And then it just kept going on and on and on. And it's been really remarkable, though, from really kind of watching restaurants evolve and adapt. I mean, so much of those early days were really survival tactics, and a lot of it was technology based, especially on the full service side. It was, we've got to get on delivery if we weren't doing it, or, maybe meal kits or alcohol to go, whatever might fit for us, or maybe it didn't fit for us, but we have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became, how do you reopen? Do we push the tables, aside? I mean, I actually remember early on before, it was even mandated that some restaurants were just removing half their tables so that people could kind of sit away from each other. And that being kind of a really crazy story,
Mm-hmm.
And then you went from suddenly, you had these 25% capacities and 50 and 75, and every market was different, and multi-unit operators were trying to, navigate franchisees through this and trying to figure out where did the science match up and did consumers believe this? And it was just such a crazy journey. And frankly, it's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
But to your broader question of surprising trends, I would say that the thing that really has caught my eye throughout this has just kind of been the store model redesigns on the quick service side. Before COVID, the idea of like McDonald's or whoever dropping a new prototype was such a rare event.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it was rare is obvious. I mean, the capital is intense. I mean, when they were doing their Experience of the Future redesign, I mean, that was one of the biggest stories over the course of probably 3 or 4 years. I mean, the amount of money was extraordinary.
Is that the one that they did in Chicago, I believe?
So the experience of the future is all those kiosks you see
Yeah,
inside McDonald's now.
right.
So yeah, I mean that scales back a few years, but the point kind of being that that was any prototype or new restaurant design or drive-through change was huge news.
Hmm.
And then when we suddenly had within the course of I would say 2 months, pretty much every major quick service restaurant in America release just these wild prototypes. I mean, Burger King has this image where they're sending food through a conveyor belt.
Hmm.
Whether or not that ends up opening, I have no idea. But just what comes out of this from a real estate perspective, from a design perspective, I think is going to be game changing for years and decades to come. This idea that now you can pull into a curbside dedicated spot at a Taco Bell, things like that are really going to last. I was talking to someone recently about, kind of like, this idea of what changes are here to stay, or, the consumer has changed for good, and what does that mean? And a lot of people initially off the bat say, okay, well, food safety and sanitation and wearing masks and staying away from each other. But these things all have a shelf life to some degree. But what does not have a shelf life and what probably has changed forever is the definition of convenience, right?
Hmm.
So, during the pandemic, for example, if you ordered Jersey Mike's on an app and you went in and you just picked it up and you didn't have to queue in line, you may never do that again, right? So I think that that's the lasting change is the convenience element to come out of COVID, and that's going to be an evolving journey. So I think it was coming already, but it was accelerated to a point that we would have never ever seen had this not arrived.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke at a conference. I want to say maybe like 3 years ago. Yeah, wow, 2019, and I was talking about revolutionizing the restaurant, format as a whole, like what's next and everything. And man, I really hammered home, like, yeah, I know you're starting to see some kiosks, you're starting to see online ordering, but this stuff, we're not even scratching the surface, and you got to make the investments now. Um, little did I know, little did I know that, like you said, the whole thing would be completely. I mean, what's faster than accelerated? There's got to be a word for that. I mean, like ludicrous speed. All of a sudden, it was like, no, 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 it's now. It's not. It's not soon. It's now. And
Yeah, yeah.
the
Compression is
yeah,
kind of the word I've heard a lot. Is that it compressed within a matter of months, or weeks, or whatever it was for whoever you're talking about.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean that's a spot on thing because it's we were all headed this way in quick service in terms of trying to remove friction from the ordering experience, especially mobile, and anything involving digital ordering. But it became it became a lifeline though because you really didn't have a choice. I mean, you didn't want 500 people calling the restaurant
yeah,
every day and things like that. So it was just sent into kind of hyperspeed or ultra drive. We could keep
yeah,
using different phrases
yeah.
for this, but yeah, I mean that's where we are now. So it ushered in that era, and I don't think we're going back.
Yeah, I mean, there's talks of like going back to normal. I just and I can't stand the phrase "new normal," but
Yeah,
I don't see. I mean, it takes, what do they say, a few weeks for new behavior to set in. Uh, we've been doing this for more than a few weeks, and so I do see a slingshot back to dining in, as people, as the science and the leadership start to display belief in science, meaning we still need masks as of this date of recording. But as people get vaccinated, as people recover from COVID, the science says that we're good and that masks are probably not necessary any longer. I'm looking forward to that moment. I think when that happens, the older demographic, we will start to see more active in person dining. I don't know about where you're living, but here in Georgia, I'm pretty astounded by the youth just don't seem to care. They're just sort of like, yeah, whatever, dude. I mean, and maybe they shouldn't because the statistics show that they're very much not in danger of being anything other than uncomfortable as with any other like cold. Um, but I think we're all looking forward to those moments. But the sanitization and keeping things clean, I think for better is now in focus, because for a while, like people knew that, but there are a lot of operators who I think didn't necessarily take it as serious as they needed to. And now it's like, if there is any signs of, unsanitary practices, I don't think a restaurant's going to recover very well from that. So those inspection scores of 95 or less are like going to be death nails, at least for a very long time. Would you agree with that, or am I just speculating?
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's I almost didn't bring it up before just because it's table stakes now, and it should have always been like you said, but it probably wasn't, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's without question now that if you lose that trust on the food safety element in this world that we live in now, you're probably lost that consumer for good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you have to, and a lot of those things, wearing masks and cleaning tables, and customers still want to see that. And I think they're going to want to see it for a while. So yeah, no, I totally agree. And kind of something that you mentioned there about dining out that I think is almost reverses to the other side of what we were talking about with quick service is I think there's actually going to be an even better opportunity for full service restaurants because of that convenience element and quick service to actually lean into the social dining experience as we kind of seek out what we really missed. I mean, there's been so many studies about what do people miss most throughout the past year or so, and dining out is always really high. So I actually think hospitality and better service and sitting down to dinner for an hour. I mean, that was getting kind of blurry before COVID a little bit. Trying to understand, whether or not you wanted to put a kiosk on the table in a, casual dining restaurant and things like that. But I think that will actually become a really good white space opportunity for full service to separate themselves from, the McDonald's of the world now, because there will be a lot of people who have had McDonald's
Mm-hmm.
through the drive-through and through pickup and all these different things in the past year. But one thing that they have not done is gone down and sat at a restaurant and had someone serve them and, bring them alcohol and drinks and all that stuff. So I think that that's going to, and we hear a lot about that pent-up demand, and that opportunity sitting on the other side. And I think that's going to be a very, very real thing. And it's exciting. So, I hope we're headed there. I don't know when that happens.
Yeah.
But I do think that moment is going to arrive, and I've actually already seen it with older people where I live. Where I go out, and I go by a restaurant and it's all old people, dining out because I guess they're vaccinated. So I do think that moment is coming, and hopefully sooner than later. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's a positive sight indeed. Looks like Miss Maggie in the background is awake for a moment. For those who are listening in, Maggie is
Uh,
a beautiful basset hound. Is it she a basset hound?
yeah, she is. She is definitely a basset
Yeah,
hound.
hanging out in the background.
Always.
So it's funny you
Yeah.
mentioned McDonald's. I went through the drive-through a while back. I usually don't eat that kind of food, but I was in a pinch and I just had a hankering, and I just happened to look, and they had 100% inspection score. And
Mhm.
so you mentioned like if people expect it or not. I definitely didn't. I expected 90s, but I asked for the manager in the drive-through, and I was like, "Hey, great job, dude! Like that is a great, like good work, because I feel like those fast food greasy spoon restaurants could get away with a little bit of dirt. I don't think people are going there for the cleanest experience, but to see that level of operational excellence is great. Um,
Yeah, and I think there's another part to that too. Someone had mentioned this to me the other day is that without dine-in service, it's becoming easier to be clean.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I mean that's a short-term thing, but interesting to think about that. When you're operating drive-through only, and it's just your employees a little bit. You can control that a little more than you were before, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's something. But to your bigger point, I do think that every brand, especially the chains with the resources, that they're going to make that a major major priority. There's no question about that.
So with the fast or not fast casual, the casual full service restaurants, do you see this as a potential death nail? I mean, they've already been struggling, like, the Ruby Tuesdays, the Applebee's, the TGI Fridays, these places that, yeah, I hate to throw punches, but they're pretty low on the service, even though they try to be really good. And I guess what I'm getting at, and what makes me think this could be, is we already have a shortage of talent, of people who want to be in that restaurant space. I don't think that that is going to spring back too much. And so, talent who's out there, talent meaning people who know not just how to go through the motions of service, but actually provide remarkable service. Um, they're not going to want to go to a place like Fridays when they have an opportunity to maybe go to a place that is a higher end restaurant that has the hallmarks of fine service. So do you think that divide gets exacerbated? And do you see a world where maybe the Applebee's and the Fridays and those folks rethink full service and go to more of a true fast casual model, meaning quicker
Yeah.
ordering, but then the people focus on servicing the guest? What do you think about that without getting yourself into any danger?
Well, no, so I do not think it's a death knell for casual dining. In fact, I think it has the potential to be the opposite if gone about smartly. Back in like a decade ago or so, when you really sort of saw this casual dining struggle, where you had these massive chains start to retract, a lot of the issue there was that they kind of lost sight of that core brand affinity, and a lot of people started to blame millennials because we get blamed for most things.
Yeah, it is all your fault, but it's okay.
Yeah, I'm like on the outside of being a millennial, but I guess I technically am one. But yeah, I mean, essentially, what happened was that you saw restaurants like Chili's getting these gigantic menus, and they were trying to appeal to people who never went there in the first place, and it ended up being a serious brand drift problem that really stretched across Applebee's and everybody in that sector. However, I see this opportunity as being almost the reverse of that. Outback, Darden, and a lot of these brands, they really shrunk their menus. That's something they've been talking about a lot, in the last few weeks and months. And one of the things about that is that it improved execution, and cut down on food waste, and some things like that allowed them to be better at specific things. Outback's case was really like a steak focused menu, and they also brought the price down a little bit on some of the appetizers and entrees, and that's kind of an interesting thing to me, because I think that this is a chance to become more of who you were. And consumers in the last year, with a lot of local restaurants and independents struggling or closing, or maybe not being able to serve off premise locations, they really had an opportunity to introduce themselves to customers who maybe had not considered them before. They went out to think, like, where can I eat? Maybe
Mhm.
Chili's might have been the only option at
Yeah.
that moment, where before they had a lot of different places they could order from. And I think that gave them a chance to kind of lean into, Red Robin refers to it as moments of connection. Family dining, bringing, a millennial family as they start to get into their 30s and they have kids and stuff like that. So I think there's a big chance here for that kind of segment that was probably a little bit tired in certain circles.
Hmm.
And then the other part of that too that I keep hearing about, I don't know if this is actually playing out in real time, but is this demographic shift out of the urban markets into the suburbs for a lot of younger people. And oftentimes when you do that, what do you find but casual dining, right?
Right.
So you might say, oh, I've kind of always heard of Applebee's, but living in New York City, I didn't go to one. But now that I'm in the suburbs, might give it a shot. But to your point, of labor and talent and service, you can't just hope that that's going to happen, and then you get the one time guest, and then they never come back. So we've heard a lot of good things from these restaurants in terms of improving service. Going back to Red Robin, they've got this whole new model called a TGX, where they're essentially trying to, you're getting orders at the table with a handheld device. And so, your drink might arrive before the person next to you even finishes their order, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that.
And yeah, and that kind of melds a little bit of, like, is this completely full service like a fine dining experience, or is it a little bit of a fast casual mixed in with having a waiter? And I think that's a good question, and I don't know how it evolves, but I will say that, I hope the casual dining that they emerge from this more consumer focused than they were a decade ago, with a chance to perhaps use technology and scale as a differentiator, and to
Hmm.
actually focus on the things that younger consumers want, which is going to be better food quality, maybe a sustainability driven purpose, and also, service and waiters and things like that that are more in tune, and you don't walk out saying, well, that was a horrible experience.
Right.
Because I think, 5, 10 years ago, as a millennial, you really didn't see yourself in one of these places. That wasn't your crowd, it wasn't your people. And you see this now, like, even if you look at Denny's, their Tumblr and their social media accounts, and IHOP and all these kind of brands, they're starting to appeal and become, more relatable, instead of like being this kind of stodgy old brand. And value, to the earlier point, is going to be a huge part of this, especially with Applebee's. That's kind of who they hang their hat on, what they lost sight of and they got back to. And
Hmm.
as we get out of the pandemic, it's going to be a big part of how they can differentiate from those smaller independents. So yeah, I do think that there is a bright future in casual dining, but it's going to take some work. So
Yeah.
there will be winners and losers, as always.
Yeah, I can see it. Especially with rising crime rates in a lot of the major cities. That's a very real thing happening right now. This pattern has emerged before, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, as people left major city centers for suburbs. I can easily see that starting to happen more and more. It may not be to the extent that it happened the first time around, but certainly that would help casual dining thrive in combination with what you said. I mean, let's face it, they were bloating their menus so much, like you said, that it became, what is a Fridays? Like, what is it? I don't even know. What's a Chili's? What's a Ruby Tuesdays? What's an Applebee's? How do I categorize these brands? And if I see a Chili's on my left side and a Fridays on my right side, what's really helping me make that choice for the kind of evening I want to have? So hopefully they're doing a lot of soul searching, because I think that will help them land on their feet and start to commit to something as opposed to commit to everything. um,
Yeah. I mean, it's that old term of, being all things to all people and ending up standing for nothing.
yeah.
I think that described that category really, really well a
Yep.
few years ago. So, the soul searching that you mentioned, COVID was a really great time for that, for these brands. And I think you will see unit count drop down out of it,
Hmm.
but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing.
Right. Unless you're
So yeah,
investing.
I mean, let's ask this question again 3 years from now.
Yeah. Let's see how smart we are.
But in talking to casual dining operators, or just hearing them, on some of these kind of calls and things, I will say that there is a level of optimism there that was not there a few years ago. I think they see these shifting trends, and they've seen a lot of business in the last year from consumers they were not getting before,
Hmm.
via delivery or what have you. But will these be repeat customers? That
Right.
that is what time will tell here. So.
That's great. Well, so besides the format trends, we saw the chicken sandwich wars happen. Looks like they're maybe heating up a little bit, or at least Zaxby's wants them to heat up a bit as they
Right.
finally released their chicken sandwich. What other trends are you seeing, and then maybe what trends seem like they're going to fizzle out?
Well, yeah, the chicken salad sandwich wars are fun. There's no, and what I keep telling people is there's no evidence of them dying down. It's just, and what's kind of exciting about them, and Zaxby's being a good example here, is that every time that there is a story like that, they all use each other to kind of leverage their own product again.
Hmm.
Taco Bell, maybe like a month ago, had this chicken sandwich taco, and Zaxby's just sort of made fun of it, and other people chimed in. But yeah, so it's going to continue to feed itself, and it's good for the consumer. And, from sales wise, it appears to also be good for the chicken restaurants who are releasing these, sandwiches. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah. But, one thing I will say is in terms of fizzling out, I know that we've seen a lot of movement toward comfort food in the last year. And I think I think the clock is ticking on that to a degree because I think the reason for that
Hmm.
out of the gate made a lot of sense. People they lost a little bit of their adventurous dining side, where, if you were ordering, you might order the thing that you knew and trusted, or that you maybe missed, or, reminded you of something comforting. Cause, we were all living these crazy, uncomfortable lives. So, it's like, all right,
Yeah.
well, now it's time for mashed potatoes and gravy or whatever. But
Well,
I
and can you
think we're
really afford to spend a ton of money on a plate that
yeah,
you don't know is good or not to have it delivered and all that other stuff? Like, you know what I mean? If you mess that
right.
up, you don't really have an option for food quickly, you know? At a
Yeah,
restaurant, you could send it back and say, go get me the hamburger. This tuna tartare with caper foam on top is not what I hoped it would be.
right.
But with third party delivery, man, that's a $200 evening if you're not careful.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think though, as we emerge out of the quarantine fog and we kind of start going back in the public, we're going to get a little bit more health focused, which is where the needle was going before COVID, especially in fast casual. I
Hmm.
mean, that was the story for a long time. And, plant-based burgers, it was like, when have we even heard about that in the last year? That was such a big story over and over again. And ahead of it, who was like, Burger King, Impossible Burger, and all these sort of things.
Right.
I think that's going to come back. I think people are going to, actually go about it pretty fiercely, because they're going to say, oh man, I've been in my house for, all these months, and I've probably gained 30 pounds, and, whatever it is. So I think health focused dining is going to have play a big role as we go forward, and some of that comfort food stuff is going to come back a little bit, especially as we start to balance dining in and eating at home, to more normal levels. So that's one, and
Yeah.
I don't know where we are in that spectrum of that being a thing. I know personally I've kind of started to do that already when I dine out. It's like, okay, I've ordered a lot of pizzas in the last
Hmm.
year. I should probably consider doing something else. And even then, like, you were ordering. One of the biggest trends in the early days were less orders but larger orders. Domino's and a lot of brands were reporting this, and some of that stemmed from, it's like, all
Hmm.
right, well, Danny, you go out and get food for everybody. There wasn't really a lot of solo
Yeah.
occasions taking place because we're not going to work and everything. So I think that that'll shift in time too, because we are going to start going back to work. I mean, maybe not at the level as before. Office buildings will probably not rebound to where they were for a long time, maybe ever. I read stories about that all the time, but no one has a good answer for that. Whether or not, there's all this commercial real estate, and something's got to give there in time. But so I think that's going to be a thing. This idea of going and getting a coffee on your way to work, which just completely died in the first several months of COVID. That's going to come back.
Yeah.
Um, Starbucks and Dunkin', they really saw this drive toward people getting coffee as like a treat or an indulgent occasion, either mid morning or in the afternoon. I mean, I've done that countless times where it's 3 o'clock and I'm like, I need to get out of here, and I'll just go get a coffee.
Yeah.
Um, but what did not exist anymore was me grabbing one on my way. So I think that these are things that are going to come back, and then there's going to be a slide. If we're going to go one way, we're going to go the other.
Right.
Takeout's going to go down as dining comes up, and that's really what we're going to have to pay attention to, is what happens to the day part occasions, because they've been completely fractured and basically rewritten during COVID. And how has human behavior really changed? When are we eating? Is late night going to come back?
Right.
Are people going to start going to bars again? And then getting White Castle on the way home, and all those kind of things. And what's exciting about that, if you assume that that's going to return, is that now I could go, and then I could order 500 White Castles on my phone and walk in and not have to deal with the embarrassment of asking the server.
Yeah, yeah,
um, so yeah, I mean, there are more tools to meet the kind of trends that dominated restaurants before COVID, but then went away. And so hopefully they'll all come back, and then you've got more ammo to drive transactions than you did before. So, we're going to have to see how it goes, but it's really a moving target on so many levels right now.
absolutely. Um, so we have time for one more question, and I think it's in the same vein here. I would love your opinion on the future of ghost kitchen virtual brand trend. Is this something that is going to be basically incubators for brick and mortar, or is this something that's just going to melt away? What do you think about
Well,
it?
that's a loaded thing too, but I'm personally a believer in a ghost kitchen model over the virtual brand model for the long term. And the reason I say this, first of all, we're getting to the point where there are too many virtual brands. That's just starting to stretch to the point of, where it's about to snap.
You're saying we don't need another wings virtual brand? Come on, where are we supposed to get wings?
But, I tried to explain recently to my father-in-law what a virtual brand was. How you could be ordering wings from Chili's, but you don't know that it's Chili's, and yet it's made at Chili's, but you get it as a customer and never knew it was from Chili's. And he did not understand this.
I imagine your father like as an old New Yorker, like I don't understand, even
Right?
though I
Yeah,
have no reason to think he talks like that.
it's not too far off actually. But yeah, I mean, I had no idea what I was talking about, and I think, and then you saw a bunch of stories. This maybe 3 weeks ago about customers were getting Red Robin's virtual brands, and they were saying like, "Wow, I feel almost deceived that I didn't know this was from Red Robin."
Yeah,
And I think there is a point where that becomes an issue in time, and I think that it's going. Now with that said, there will be brands who can pull that off, and Chili's is actually one of them because you have the resources to basically set up all the branding and social media and things for one of these virtual brands to almost exist like a regular brand.
hmm
And then some of those, celebrity versions of this, like Mr. Beast is kind of the, famous one. And that probably has some legs, but I think that restaurants will stop launching those in time. But what I think that they'll continue to do is launch ghost kitchens where they can, seed a market,
hmm
decide if they should actually go in there, because it's a great way to test demand, with basically no overhead, and see whether or not people would actually order your product. But one of the questions that I think we all have is, beyond the DoorDash marketing or the Uber Eats, if you launch on there as a virtual brand, they put you at top, people see it. What happens a month later, right?
right.
I mean, are you still ranking high above the 400 wing chains that suddenly popped up in Atlanta?
hmm
And that's where you lose the value of being a Chili's or a brand that people actually searched for. And that's long been kind of the question of a DoorDash versus direct delivery or ordering through a restaurant, is that a lot of the users on a third party app are more product loyal than brand loyal, where they said I want to go get a burger and then they just typed in burger, versus like I want to go find Applebee's specifically.
hmm
And so I think long term that this is where it's going to start to break a little bit, because the value to a restaurant moving forward is trying to get that data and access that direct channel service. And you're not really going to gain that much ground if you only do it straight through a virtual brand, on one of these aggregator platforms. So,
Yeah.
you often hear, or you heard, especially before COVID, where it'd say, okay, incremental delivery customers. Okay. But the ultimate goal is that I funnel them back into my website, or I get them to start ordering through me, or getting on my rewards platform and, navigating them over. But if you can there's no possible way to do that with a virtual brand, right? So you're going to be paying that commission and losing that data, basically, forever if you continue down that road. So the ultimate goal to me, and I think this is true of a lot of restaurants, is to find a way to keep that branding. I talked to Bennigan's about this, and they're doing different kind of ghost kitchen setups, even in hotels and stuff like that. And I think there's a lot of legs there because people recognize the brand, and if you're doing crazy business that way, you could say, well, okay, I should probably open a brick and mortar down the street. But how do you gauge that really from a virtual brand? And maybe you open a brick and mortar off a virtual brand. Right. Maybe that's a thing. I don't really know, but I think most restaurateurs would tell you, especially smaller ones, that the long-term play is to, look down that ghost kitchen space over that virtual one. But again, did we think we'd have 100,000 virtual brands here in 2021? Probably not. So, who knows what happens? It's hard to predict, and we'll kind of see where we're at. But that would just be my personal thing, because I think that data is just ultimately valuable, and you want to do anything you can to gather, collect it, and use it to remarket and inspire trial, because that's where the game will always be won for restaurants.
Yeah, I think what we see is, opportunists will jump at a quick fix or a way to make a quick buck. And I think that's what this started as is, boom, I can get out there. And like you said, hey, I'm going to be top of the list because I'm fresh and I'm new. But as time marches on, there's a lot of this mentality of just design something nice, call it whatever, give it a kooky name for the sake of it, which is great because there isn't apprehension. There's not a lot of apprehension because it feels ephemeral. It feels less permanent because it's a ghost kitchen. So we see fun names and fun brands coming out of this, but then there's no funds to market the brand. They're not putting the meat behind it to actually get beyond that initial wave that everyone gets when they open up. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's, there needs to be a future, and that future has to be fueled by, one, shifting to a place where you're able to get the data, where you're able to quote unquote own the customer a bit more. And then also, like, you have to market these things. It can't just be set it and forget it. And I think the brands that choose to do that, they might find themselves looking at brick and mortar because they realize there's a nice market for this in those areas. I could talk to you all day about this. I wish we could, but we're at 36 minutes now, Danny. Where can people find you? Social handles, all that.
Yeah, sure. So you can always email me, which is just danny@foodnewsmedia.com. But yeah, if you want to talk about social, find me on LinkedIn. I used to be a big Twitter user back in my sports writing days, but I have since exited that platform.
Probably better off for it.
It's a wild west of opinions, and most of them horrible. So yeah, LinkedIn would be the place to find me personally. I try to stay pretty active on there. You will see Maggie photos every Friday if I stay on top of it, which is,
great way to end the week.
Probably the popular thing I do, but yeah, just like I said, I think at the very beginning, sign up for our e-letters. Every morning, everything is free. Both our publications are free, and yeah, I look forward to hearing from you. Just feel free to throw a question at me, whatever you might have.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks for your time today and all your insights. This is incredible. So definitely check out Danny, and then also check out QSR Magazine and FSR Magazine if by some wild chance you don't already follow them. A ton of great information out there, and they've been fantastic at coverage during the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, and I know that will continue on. Danny, thanks for your time. I very much appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for having me.
If you love what we've served up, please follow us at Vigor Branding on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Medium. Forktales is produced by the team at Vigor. Audio and video post-productions provided by Zencaster. Music performed by Jet Trash and licensed through musicbed.com. Joseph handles his own hair, makeup, and stunts. Copyright 2003 to 2021, Vigor Graphic Design LLC, all rights reserved.